Great. Perfect timing. Thank you, Jackie. Can people see my intro slide? Awesome.
Yes.
So we are really excited to be here tonight representing Gunpowder Valley Conservancy. Um, I'm Amy. Ibram is my coworker. We're going to go into our bios in the next slide. Just wanted to do a couple, just acknowledge a couple of things. So tonight, the title is Address Stormwater in Your Backyard with Conservation Gardens. And we really hope that after tonight, we inspire you, if you don't already have native plants in your home landscape, that you can see some of the benefits, both as for yourself, like, selfish reasons to do it, but also there are like larger community benefits incorporating native plants and conservation gardens at home. We are an environmental nonprofit, so especially now, it's very important to acknowledge our funders. So we are very grateful for the support of National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, Chesapeake Bay Trust, Maryland Department of Natural Resources, Baltimore County Department of Department of Environmental Protection and Sustainability. And as Jackie mentioned earlier, we've been really fortunate to also partner with Hartford Land Trust this year and share some of our resources through our overlapping territories. We had service areas, and we had a rain barrel workshop earlier this fall. So let me see if this will work. Why won't my, okay, here we go. So tonight, just the three parts of tonight's talk, we'll go over what's your watershed and why it's important, go into detail about growing clean water with conservation gardens, and then some next steps you can take at home to kind of put this into practice. Ibram and I are your guides tonight. I'm Amy Young. I'm the Outreach and Stewardship Manager with Gunpowder Valley Conservancy. I wear many hats. So with outreach, I'm involved with a lot of our written communication and giving presentations to the public. Stewardship is a newer part of my job where I am helping to manage, as a land trust, our annual monitoring visits to preserve properties and make sure they're in um, good shape and be a point of reference to those landowners. But I'm really excited for this talk tonight because I'm trained as a plant ecologist. So I've, for a long time, traveled across the country working with endangered plant species, working over in Oregon doing native seed collection. So very much a supporter of native plants. And I love being able to, even though coworkers like Ibram are the ones who make it a reality and design the gardens, I can at least get people excited about gardens and all their wonderful benefits. So Ibram, who are you?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Pleasure to meet you all. My name's Ibram Victoria, and I'm the new Director of Ecological Restoration and Design with GVC. My background is in horticulture, design build, green infrastructure, stormwater management. Um, I design and build gardens, and also our programs. I oversee our streams program, our forestry program, and our gardens programs. So it's a pleasure to be with you guys tonight. Hopefully it won't be too technical. I definitely love the metrics and the performance of these gardens, but also the aesthetics and the beauty. So hope it will be interesting for you guys today.
Great. So like I said, we're going to be taking turns, but I will start off, get everyone up to speed, thinking about what your watershed is and why it's important. Um, so we all are familiar with our address. We know where we live. If you have kids, you know your school district. As a voter, you know the different jurisdictions there. But I would like to challenge everyone tonight to think about your home watershed. Another way to think about that is, where does the water go when it rains on your home, on your property? The reason why we should think about this is that in Maryland, most of us live within half a mile of some type of body of water, and that all eventually drains and goes to the Chesapeake Bay. Just to take a step back for a second. So a watershed is a defined area of land. So it's, takes into consideration the topography and other features. And so when it rains on that defined area, all the rainwater goes to the same, it all goes to the same place, kind of like a bathtub. All the water spread out, but it's all gonna go down the drain. Um, so you are always in a watershed. And you're also in more than one watershed at a time. Just think about like zooming in and out to a place. So like I said, here in Maryland, we are proud to be part of the multi-state Chesapeake Bay watershed. But if you zoom in a little bit to like region or county, you're part of these river basins. And so for us, we're in the Gunpowder River watershed. And you can even zoom in, on a finer level, like a sub-watershed level to like the stream in your neighborhood. That might be, for us, the lower Gunpowder Falls. Gunpowder Valley Conservancy, we are obviously, we work within the Gunpowder watershed, but it is pretty important for several reasons. So for us, it's what connects us to the Chesapeake Bay. Um, but also it's very valuable from you know, for just the general population throughout the greater Baltimore area, because over 60% of our drinking water comes from Pretty Boy and Lock Raven reservoirs which are both within the Gunpowder watershed. Again, just the number of people who are impacted by the gunpowder, 2 million people live here, work, or they recreate within the Gunpowder watershed. Going over to Harford County, as we alluded to, there's this little sliver of the gunpowder in I guess, Western Harford County. So that light blue area, if you live in that area, when it rains at your house, it goes to the gunpowder to the Chesapeake Bay. But there's also the Bush River, Lower Susquehanna River, and the upper Western Shore. So these are kind of like the four big ways that the rain stormwater flows across the landscape. And then probably at this point you're like, okay, that's kind of a cool fact, but why are we talking about, rain and where it goes? And it's really important to keep in mind the context of, it's one thing for it to rain on a forest, but once the rain falls on a built-up environment, things have changed. We've created these hard surfaces. So our parking lots and driveways and houses, these are all um, affecting the water, and an impervious or hard surface ultimately prevents water from seeping back into the ground, keeping the natural water cycle going, recharging groundwater. So with in suburban areas, when we have increased impervious surface, you have increased runoff, and that leads to increased pollution. And I know we know it's a little uncomfortable. We don't really want to think about, being, we're probably, we're at an environmental talk on a Thursday night. We probably all associate being tree huggers on some level. Like, where is this pollution coming from? It's, from things like trash, whether it's just if there's trash on the ground or motor oil from a car, once the rain interacts with that, it gets polluted. But there's also the issue of excess nutrients. You probably have heard how increased nitrogen and phosphorus in the Chesapeake Bay kind of alters um, habitat for plants and animals and can have negative consequences. And so that excess nutrients can come from fertilizer, also pet waste. We all have that neighbor that doesn't clean up after their dog. And, pet waste is also just the concentration, like how many, it's just, how many people, are leaving their pet waste behind. And there's the potential for biological pathogens that also cause a health risk. And finally, the other source of pollution is sediment. So if we clear cut an area where we had trees and shrubs, and now that's gone. There's nothing really holding the soil together. You have risk of erosion, and this is really visible in our waterfront communities, where after a rainstorm, all that soil adds up and can lead to muddy conditions. Um, and it's really important to also keep in mind that unlike the wastewater in our house, that gets treated, stormwater runoff will go to the nearest body of water, and that could be going to the storm drain, then going to, for my example, going to Bird River. Um, it doesn't get treated. So that's why we're really trying to be mindful about reducing stormwater runoff before it continues across the landscape. Um, I think, just taking a step back, so the stormwater runoff has a larger impact in the community. And for us, the larger community is the Chesapeake Bay. And I think this picture kind of is a great example of what, restoration is working towards. We want clean, clear water with, healthy animals and plants, but also, in the water, on the land. But there's also in the background, there's a sailboat, there's a farm, there's a city, there's places for humans to be part of this healthy Chesapeake Bay. As you're probably aware of, we've been working towards, collectively, we've been working towards Chesapeake Bay restoration for decades now. Um, so, you know, at the lowest point in, the early 80s, the Chesapeake Bay had a score of 23. And it's, slowly going up with with the efforts to reduce different sources of pollution. Um, on this scale, from 0 to 100 being pristine, they consider 100 to be back from the 1600s when Captain John Smith was first exploring the bay, and we realized we're never, just life and all the things we're never going to get back to 100. But if we get to 70, like that's like considered a stable, healthy bay. So that's kind of what everyone, all the different components are we were working towards getting to that point. And so there is an annual Chesapeake Bay report card. I know we all kind of strive for straight A's and B's, but I think a C with an upward trend is really good because it's showing, um, you know, we're going in the right direction. And the watershed, the report card is pretty comprehensive. It takes into consideration 7 bay indicators. So that's different assessments of water quality. And then what I really like is that there are also 12 watershed indicators. So that's like the ecology, are there healthy animals? Is there a healthy fish community? But also how much land is being protected? Can people walk to parks? That's all part of a healthy watershed. Um, just a couple more slides of my doom and gloom. But so we've talked about stormwater runoff having a negative impact on the bay. So what happens when you have this new variable of, or newer developing trend of climate change? These are just a summary of data from NOAA from in recent years. So average air temperature has increased over the past century, upwards of between half a degree to 2.5 degrees. And so that, it's warmer temperatures, and then factor in urban environments where you have the heat island effect, where it's even more if you don't have sufficient tree canopy, there's, it's even more of a dramatic increase in temperature. The same goes for water temperature. It's increased by 1.8 degrees over the past century. And that's of concern to, keystone species like brook trout and other animals that rely on cold water and, having forested stream buffers to cool down the water. If the water's too hot, they can't survive. And then something we're all familiar with is flooding, increased flooding, and sea level rise. That's really important to factor in the Chesapeake Bay, because with all the peninsulas and the jagged coastline, that's almost 12,000 miles of coastline that's vulnerable to rising sea levels. The Bay Journal had an article last year. They are a great free resource online and print about everything Chesapeake Bay. But this article was about climate change and how that would impact nutrient pollution. And as you might expect, it's complicated. So as I've been talking about, well, if there's more rain, you're going to have more runoff, and that might increase pollution. But on the other side, maybe something that's balancing it out is, well, if we have warmer temperatures, the plants are going to grow for a longer amount of time. They might have more time to do their function of filtering out nutrients. So it's, to be determined. Let's err on doing things now to make a positive um, difference. So we are making our way to the conservation garden slide. I'm just going to give you a couple more, a little bit more about our background about GVC. So as we mentioned, we are a local watershed nonprofit as well as a land trust. So we work on land and water. This is our 36th anniversary. We have not quite 10 staff and consultants. It's growing over time. We have a board of directors and really volunteers, as you probably know with other nonprofits. Our volunteers do a lot of our on the ground work and really get things done in terms of our environmental stewardship projects. Our mission is to engage, connect, and inspire people to preserve and restore the gunpowder watershed. When we started in 1989, we were in Kingsville, and the Jericho Covered Bridge was a local landmark and very much part of our identity. Our logo has changed in recent years to be more of a natural scene of the gunpowder, but the idea of the bridge and the bridge connecting people to people and the environment, that's still something that GVC strives to uphold. And then our vision is a gunpowder watershed with healthy lands, healthy waterways, and healthy communities. The idea that people are part of a watershed, that we're all connected, the ripple effect of things. We have many programs to promote clean water. Excuse me. And I'm just going to quickly go over these. We plant trees. We're probably getting close to 45 or maybe even closer to 50,000 trees throughout our watershed, with an emphasis of planting trees around Loch Raven Reservoir, where there is an aging monoculture of white pines, and we want to add diverse plant diversity back to that area. So we have healthy forests, healthy wildlife habitat around our drinking water supply. But it's not enough to plant trees. Our staff and our volunteers go back to, our tree planting sites to do tree maintenance. And a lot of that is, excuse me, removing non-native plants from a certain, diameter around the trees. The trees are, in those plastic shelters to protect from deer browsing. So we have to go back and eventually remove those when the trees are big enough. But these are all things that we do to make sure that there's a higher survivorship of the trees we plant. Stream cleanups are also another obvious way to promote clean water. And I like this slide because, this is probably about 10 people in that picture. They collected 900 pounds in a single event in Middle River. And if you try to block out the fact that, well, someone generated that much trash in the first place, but there's people that are willing to do their part to reverse that trend. And that is always a surprise and heartwarming. And then with land preservation, there's so many benefits to land preservation, but in terms of stormwater runoff, the idea when you preserve land, you're minimizing the development. You're reducing the number of houses that can be on, a certain acreage. And so by reducing the number of houses and the paved infrastructure, you're reducing stormwater runoff. So that is a positive for the Chesapeake Bay. And so with Gunpowder Valley Conservancy, about 13 years ago, we started our Clear Creeks project. It's grown over time and now serves the entire gunpowder watershed. We have grant funding to provide homeowners, businesses, and institutions with what we call Clear Creeks practices. The technical term is stormwater best management practices, but it's things that you can do at home to reduce stormwater runoff. I'll talk quickly about rain barrels and then we'll get into the fun with conservation gardens. So a rain barrel is a way to, conserve water. The idea is that you're reducing stormwater runoff by slowing it down. You're capturing it so it doesn't keep running off onto the, over possible sources of pollution, spreading it out and soaking it in. So whether you use that water to water your garden or wash your car, or even just let it soak into the ground later on when it's dry out, you're really promoting water going into the ground and not across it. As a sustainability bonus, we are fortunate to partner with McCormick and Dijon Vineyard. They use these 55-gallon barrels for different food products. We clean them out and we reuse them and modify them to make rain barrels to collect stormwater. And I just always, again, one action can make a difference. So the idea of I get one rain barrel at my house. I can have four because I have four downspouts. But I get one barrel. My neighbors are curious, like, oh, what's that? And they get inspired to install one barrel. If we have 10 homes in a neighborhood, each with one barrel that collects 1,300 gallons each summer, that's 13,000 gallons of water conserved. And as you can imagine, that scales up over time, and it's inspirational. Ibram is going to go forward. We're talking about conservation gardens. Ibram, just let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Gotcha. Yes, indeed. And everything you said, I find to be the fun part. Oftentimes we really don't know all of those different components that go into what is a watershed? Where does the rain go? And I think they're really relevant questions. So you guys may have heard of the term conservation gardens. You may have heard of bayscapes, baywise, native gardens. Essentially, they're in many ways they're talking about the same thing. These are places that are good for the habitat. They're they contribute to water quality, and they're an asset to any home, quite frankly. And they're beautiful. Yeah, so native plants. Yes, you guys may have heard of native plants and heard all the buzz around them and trying to distinguish why are they so important. And essentially, native plants have been growing in this region. Specifically in Maryland is the goal to find plants that have been growing in Maryland, but even on the East Coast, and then at a larger scheme in United States of America. They support the native insects, the native wildlife, their birds, and there are many animals that have developed, just like us, an appetite for very specific plants that help them to thrive. And when they're not available, they suffer. So by adding or by using native plants specifically, you're not only creating the habitat that they're used to, but you're providing the food and the resources that they need to survive. Yeah, so in addition to them being beautiful, like I said, they're adapted to this climate. We wonder when we use annuals or non-native plants, why they may be struggling in our gardens or why they go dormant earlier or completely die off in certain seasons. It's because they're not from here. They're not adjusted to our climate. They're not adjusted to the insects. And when we bring them from different regions, sometimes they bring their insects. And that's how we get like ash borer and Japanese beetle and other issues. Now the lace, what is it, lace fly. We get some of these insects that can totally become invasive because they're coming with these non-native plants. So it is best practices for sure to try to find a plant that has been growing in Maryland so that you know that it will be hardy, it will be durable and reliable. And then there are some other bonuses. As you see this palette, this plant palette, oftentimes people think that native plants are too wily or they're too wild. They don't look tidy. But it's all in the species, right? It's about that biodiversity where you actually do have quite a few options. But you just have to kind of broaden your horizons and explore the options. But quite a few are native and are very attractive. One of the big reasons for natives, though, is that they have a very extensive root system. Um, for example, our lawns, our turf grass that we have. Turf grass, like the traditional lawn, has very shallow roots, which is why so often we find ourselves watering it in the summer, or we find ourselves trying to fertilize it to keep it green. It's because it doesn't have a root system that can actually hold the nutrients. So you're constantly having to feed it and keep it alive. Whereas with native plants, as you see, this is, I hope you can see it pretty good, but it shows how in feet, how many feet the root system of some of these native plants can go up to over 10 feet, 3 feet. So when you go to pull it up, um, it is well rooted in the ground, and those roots actually help aerate the soil, meaning that when it rains, water can make its way down and kind of penetrate and infiltrate. It also is able to uptake water. So during droughts, whereas these short roots aren't really able to tap into the moisture in the soil, the native plants are able to uptake that much easier. It's much more opportunity for them, and they can stay cooler and just be better adjusted. And as I mentioned, native plants are habitat. So you guys may know about the monarch butterfly. It actually needs the milkweed plant. So that's the butterfly milkweed or the swamp milkweed to survive. Otherwise, they are threatened. So when you plant these specific plants, the milkweed plants, it is giving them somewhere to lay their eggs. It is giving them somewhere to feed on while they are growing, and then so that they can actually turn into um, the monarch butterfly. And also the Baltimore checker spot, which survives off of turtlehead. And both of these species grow in rain gardens. So another kind of bonus as to why they like that kind of wetter environment. And they both have very extensive root systems as well. Yes. So if we haven't brought this home enough, uh, it is benefiting many, many critters that we may not see with the visible eye, but it's a life cycle. So it's the insects, but it's also habitat for like birds. Oftentimes with grasses, birds will nest in under small shrubs, smaller trees, and you just because you don't see them, don't mean they're there. Like that turtle that we found in a rain garden that created a habitat. So soil is an ecosystem, all unto itself. Soil is very complex, and we walk on it, and um, we often don't understand that beneath the grass and everything that grows from it, it is what is the life source, so to speak, of how plants grow. They're pulling all of their nutrients from the soil. Not only is soil where they get their nutrients, for example, in the clay, it's holding it and binding it, the organic matter and the leaf matter that breaks down and releases amendments, they actually hold water. So when we put our calculations together to see how much water is held in a garden, we account for the soil. Soil is basically like a sponge. And while it's soaking up and holding water, um, it is filtering. It's a natural filter. So as water is infiltrating, again, it's going into the plants and the root systems, and those roots that are bound into that soil is uptaking any kind of pollution and kind of converting it, so to speak. Um, there's also microbes in there that are very specific to how plants grow, and certain insects feed off of that as well. So yeah, it is a very diverse ecosystem that is not just dirt. It is complex, and results may vary. So there are soils have a profile where it's kind of ranked from A to B or A to D, just like the grading system. A means it's fast draining. D means it's heavy and heavy clay, which means it doesn't have infiltration. And really, you want to have a good mix when you have a soil, ideally, of all these components. You want some clay, you want some organic matter, you want some silt, you want, yeah, a nice, I call it a cookie dough for best case. So Bayscape, like I said, you may have heard this term. It's also known as the conservation garden. It's also kind of known as the native garden. Essentially, the goal is to replace your existing lawn space with native plants. So if you have, the traditional green lawn, um, best practices would encourage you to replace that monoculture of a fescue grass or Bermuda grass, which is very it's not very productive. It's certainly it's not a very diverse it doesn't have a very diverse palette, but by removing it and replacing it with native plants, you will support, depending on your plants, you'll support the wildlife, but also pollination to allow for cross-pollination in your region, your small yard, and across your neighborhood to become more robust. And one of the other benefits is that it's a lot less maintenance. Like I said, well, it can be less maintenance in terms of the mowing that we have to do and checking on your garden and watering it. Because of those other reasons that I said with the native plants, it requires a lot less, certainly fertilizer, but then also watering. So basecaping with swells. So this is a technique that honestly has been around for a very long time. I'm talking, Native Americans all the way to indigenous communities that understood that by uh, by creating these swells in the landscape and berming up, you can actually slow the water, collect the water along contours. So you imagine when it's raining and you have a slope, right now it's hitting that surface and running off and picking up, accelerating with speed and taking some soil with it. And that's how we get erosion. And if there's a stream downstream or down that hill, that's going to all lead to that stream and fill it up. So by creating these cuts along the slope and on these contours, you can actually kind of capture that water and hold it and allow it to be filtered and slowed down. And then that water will then move slowly, much slower, through a berm that is planted. And you can fill it with wood chips, which decompose and help offset the nitrogen that may be coming into it. And in the process, you're absorbing a lot of water. So these are minor, just kind of design techniques, or one minor design technique that you can use to try and slow down water. Rain gardens, my favorite. So you may have heard of rain gardens. It gives it away in the name. It's all about capturing water when it rains. And we do that by creating a shallow depression, a basin in the garden. So this is actually digging out approximately about a foot and creating berms around it. And it allows for when it rains, it has somewhere to go. So right now, again, on your lawn, it's just running off without having an opportunity to infiltrate. So this gives it is that little tub, so to speak, that gives it somewhere to be so that it can slowly infiltrate. And they're planted with native plants, a combination that don't mind, we call them wet feet. They don't mind sitting in the water, but there's this idea or this misconception, really, that rain gardens are going to attract mosquitoes and they're going to become, they're just going to be these ponds or bogs that are holding water. But what's special about rain gardens is that they are designed to infiltrate and slowly be letting that infiltration occur over 48 hours. So there's always constant movement. Water comes in and it comes in horizontally and it is in movement vertically, returning back to the aquifers. or being having uptake with the plants. So we call them gardens with a purpose. And like I said, they are engineered specifically to absorb that runoff. And that runoff can be coming from a variety of places. Oftentimes, when I come to people's lawns, they have, or their properties, they have an issue, right? There's flooding in the backyard, or there's flooding in the front yard. And I immediately start looking up at their house because what I'm looking for is their downspouts. As Amy had mentioned, these impervious surfaces we have all over our properties. It starts with the roof. It could also be the driveway, that little sidewalk that leads from the driveway to the house. All of these places are where the water hits and then bounces and runs into the lawn. And they accumulate because they don't have an opportunity to infiltrate. So typically, we like to place rain gardens near these locations, but not too near. And I think we have a slide about that. But essentially, you want to be close enough to intercept the water before it picks up speed, before it creates an issue where there would be flooding. So yes, where do we place these? As I said, you want to be downhill from a water source. So if your water source is a downspout, we're moving 10 feet away. So you want to be 10 feet from a building foundation. And that's because as that water is infiltrating, you want to be set back so that you don't get any into your basement or into the foundation. Sometimes on sites, there's a septic. They have a septic system for their sewer. So as opposed to because these rain gardens are designed to infiltrate, we don't want to add any additional water or fluid into the septic field. So 25 feet from those. Ideally, we would like it to be full sun. But you know, as a designer, you can place a garden pretty much anywhere based on the species. But when it's in full sun, it does encourage that evaporation and it draining quicker with the sun exposure. And for folks who are closer to the water table becomes relevant because as we dig, we don't want to tap into the water. So we want to be 4 feet above that water table. And some considerations as we're, thinking about the design. One, it needs to fit into the landform and the location, right? Getting an understanding. If you have children, do they use the backyard? Are they running through? Is there a view that you want to maintain? Are there trees on the site? You don't want to or you don't want to create a rain garden directly under a tree because you're digging. You don't want to disturb the roots. So there are some constraints. But all of these constraints actually inform the design where you can work around them. And that's usually where a design gets pretty interesting. And you can kind of go with like, for example, if there's a path or a sidewalk where you can kind of go with that bend and work around it so that it's incorporated and it's aesthetic while being functional. So meeting the client's desires is of high priority. We never just want to plop a rain garden, just any old place. We want it to fit and make sense. And I mentioned earlier about that soil profile. The image on the bottom just kind of shows that when it rains, water does not it doesn't infiltrate very easily in clay. With loam, some of that organic matter in there, it has a better ability, and with sand, it can drain very quickly. So we actually create, when you're bringing in amendments, it's a combination of all of these that allow for the rain garden to drain and have good permeability, porosity. So this is a lot of numbers, and I'm not trying to overwhelm you, but just to give you an idea of the process. So once we meet with a client and they say, I've got an issue in the back of my yard, and we talk about where it could be, the next step is trying to determine where the water is coming from. And that takes a little bit of what we call, mapping out the drainage area, where I'm looking at the contour lines. And contour lines are basically the topography of the site. So where it dips, where it tilts, where is there slopes. And if you anywhere that you locate where the garden's going to be, you can kind of work backwards and see what is contributing to water at that spot. And some drainage areas are very large, right? But in a residential area, the typical neighborhood, kind of oddly, a lot of the water that ends up in a rain garden is coming from your neighbor's property. So you are contributing to your neighbor is contributing to you, and so on. So we can't just cut off a drainage area just because it's your property. You really have to zoom out past the property lines and really appreciate what is contributing to a specific issue. And so some things, like I said, the drainage area we're considering for this specific project, the drainage area was almost 5,000 square feet of area that is draining into this very specific location, coming from the neighbor and coming from the neighbor's roof, coming from their roof, and meeting in the middle. And those roofs are impervious surface. So impervious surfaces are what's really, contributing. It's not allowing that water to infiltrate. So that's something that's very important. If it was a higher impervious surface, the size of the garden would need to be larger to accommodate that. We also look at the soils. Like I said, that soil profile. Is it B soils? Is it C soils? Oftentimes there's no one soil that's showing up at a site. So they had a combination of mostly B, which means it's draining pretty good, but there is some C. And the less the natural soils infiltrate, that's how we have to make amendments to the soil blend. And all of that information kind of comes together and informs how big the garden needs to be. So in this case, the garden, we decided that the garden should be 250 square feet, though for what they're calling water quality. And water quality is basically during a 1-inch rain, the garden is able to treat it. But these days we're not getting reliable 1-inch rains, right? We're getting 3 inches in an hour or 3 inches over a day. We're getting a lot more. So we've started to oversize the gardens and overcompensate based on a minimum so that in anticipation of stronger rains and longer durations. And bottom right of this chart is kind of what this is all about. And if it's something I ask myself all the time, and I try to remember, what are we doing this for? One of the things we're doing this for is to slow down the water and catch the runoff. But a lot of this is about nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment reduction. Why is that important? That's important because with the runoff, the nitrogen, the sediment, the phosphorus is going to our waterways and creating these algae blooms. And the algae blooms are basically where the vegetation and the algae, but we'll just say vegetation to keep it simple, inside of the waterways are growing exponentially. And that growth creates dead zones where it blocks out the sunlight and it takes up all the oxygen. So the plants are using all of that oxygen, and it's not allowing the aquatic wildlife, the fish, anything trying to grow or any animals trying to grow in the water to survive. And that's how we get these fish kills that you may or may not hear about from time to time. When you think about Phragmites taking over invasive species that are just growing rampant in some of our coastal communities, it's because they're taking up all of this nitrogen, phosphorus, and then the sediment also is creating that cloud where, well, one, it's bringing up the basin of these waterway floors, and that's I said I didn't want to get too heavy in it, but the consequences essentially is that when you think about sea level rise, or you think about what's happening, oyster communities, they're not able to thrive because they're being inundated and overtaken. So nitrogen and phosphorus and the sediment is very important to catch on your property if possible, and rain gardens help do that. So yeah, so rain gardens by design. So the next step, once we do our calculations, then we get back into the fun stuff, where we're able to, then consider the plant palette, consider how it works with the property, consider all of the considerations and constraints that the site and the client have, made us consider. And then we start to design. And there are plants that are very happy at the bottom of the basin. So there's a low point, and those are where the wet feet are. And then it comes up to a berm. And that's as you go up, meeting back the surface of the lawn and on grade with the rest of the lawn, you can bring in some of your traditional plants that you're used to, your normal native plants that don't necessarily like to sit. So even though it's called a rain garden, and there are plants in there that really prefer wet surfaces, they're pretty dynamic in their design, and you can have a really nice blend. And then also you may notice the stone. So the stone is an important component of any garden because just like a stream, it takes the velocity out of runoff. So as water is moving through, it's going to become like a pre-treatment or a pre-filter, which if there is any sediment that's coming off the lawn, or if there's anything coming off your roof, sometimes there's asphalt shingles and those things, it becomes a catchment that filters that out before it actually gets into the garden. So you want to use stone. We use a river stone, just because it kind of matches the stream aesthetic, and they're rounded, so they're safe for like children and pets. Um, you want to use those on the inflow, so where water is coming in, so it's going to diffuse some of that energy and filter, and then you also want to use it on the outflow. And for this specific garden, we had two chambers. So one chamber fills up and then overflows to the second. And anywhere that water is encouraged to move, you want another stone filter. Mighty, the mighty micro bioretention. Don't let the name fool you. Micro is actually a larger practice than the rain garden. They're very similar to the rain garden in kind of the engineering or the way that they work, their purpose. So they're catching storm water, they're treating it. They have native plants, but there is a little bit more engineering in terms of how you essentially need to excavate up to 5 feet of soil, and you're replacing, as opposed to using your existing soils and rain gardens, with these, we replace the soils, and we bring in stone. So at the bottom of it is 2 feet of a stone reservoir. That's going to allow water to come in and have more opportunity to sit before and filter before it returns to recharge the aquifer. Then it has an under drain that's built into it as in the case of a rainstorm, as it's raining and filling up. This just makes sure that water is constantly flowing and moving through the system. It just is kind of like a backup insurance policy to make sure it never really sits with water. And then there's soil, and on the surface, as you see in the photo, it looks very similar to a rain garden on the surface, but it actually has quite a bit of work happening below the surface. And these are better for, maybe possibly commercial sites, adjacent a parking lot or a property with really poor soils, those D soils that just are not going to drain. We might consider MBR to help encourage that drainage. Yeah, so as I mentioned, they're not your average garden. This is just a little bit behind the scenes of, you see this very narrow area. You're like, what can I do with this teeny little strip? We all see these at businesses, and they're really underutilized. And actually, they had a pretty significant issue at this site with flooding in the parking lot, and there's buildings, so holding water, and the microbial retention allowed for that water to get caught in this system to drain and mitigate the flooding and the runoff coming from the parking lot. Am I still going,
I
or
could
is
jump
this
in.
you?
Do you want me to do you want, I can jump in if you want, or
Yeah, I think I joined just after this project.
cool. So I can provide, I will hand it back off in a little bit. So as Ibram's talked about, kind of, like, at an individual residence or at a commercial site, there's also been a lot of benefit. I should say that the last one, let me go backwards. So this is at Manor Mill, which is a really exciting historic site in Moncton, but it's also so it's a historic building, but with it's right on the Gunpowder River, a tributary to the Gunpowder. So obviously, we want to do what we can to reduce runoff. It's a great art center and just all these different create. It's a creative community hub. So we were really excited to be part of bringing our stewardship to this property. And that's just what I was going to talk about here. Through the years, we've been really fortunate to kind of focus um, these place-based gardens where we can kind of put in multiple gardens at one site and really like increase our impact. So one of our first ones was at Miramar Landing HOA in the Middle River area. Those who are familiar with native plants, I know HOAs kind of get a bad rap because they're like, these gardens are too wild. They don't match, our typical landscaping. But there are HOAs out there that get it. And this is one where Purnell Glenn, who was the president of the HOA at the time, definitely understood the value of the gardens and what that could do for community building. And so Gunpowder Valley Conservancy, over a little bit over a year, we put in a lot of trees. We created so the center picture is a quad. There's a townhouse community and like the shared green space in the middle. We were able to make like a community park with these different gardens. And the other benefit of this program was that we were able to partner with the Master Gardeners, which is through their Baywise certification program. It's a statewide project you're probably familiar with. So each county has their own Baywise Master Gardeners. And by doing with Baywise, the quick version of Baywise gardening is um, it's just making the right choices to promote, clean, clear water. So mowing at the right time of day, not using fertilizer, having a rain barrel. And so that's all to say that at Miramar Landing, their common area, their green space was Baywise certified and one of the first in Baltimore County to get that distinction. So it was really exciting. Through the years, we've also have worked a lot with faith-based institutions, and that's one other wonderful partnership with Interfaith Partners for the Chesapeake. So, in addition to when we do install a garden, not every garden, but when we can, we work with the property owner to have these free educational workshops where you can kind of Ibram or whoever is the designer at that of that garden will give a little bit background, kind of like why install a rain garden, what are the benefits of native plants, but then you get to see, the garden's like 90 or 80% finished, and then you can add some plants and kind of see firsthand learn about, hands-on gardening with native plants. So we do these workshops, but when we do it at faith-based institutions, we bring in IPC, and that's a really special additional layer where they add some programming about care of creation and how to be a steward, and the kind of the more spiritual, like why are we taking these steps to beautify our properties. So this is a really beautiful path that we worked on a couple years ago at Divinity Lutheran. There's an open prayer spot that, so it's just a nice way to bring in native plants to an important spiritual place. Again, other examples of bayscapes and rain gardens at churches in our community. Um, Another example that might be kind of um, contrary, golf course is probably not your first thing that comes to mind when you think of environmentally friendly. Like obviously, golf courses have to do certain practices to maintain the function of golf course, but Pine Ridge Golf Course is right on Raven Reservoir, and it still has a good amount of wild areas around it. So we've worked with them through the years planting trees, and we've installed several conservation gardens to just kind of augment um, the natural areas where there's space for it. And and then also it's a great way to demonstrate how you can reduce the beauty of reducing stormwater runoff um, on a property in a public space. I'm gonna let Ibram talk about this last project because I know it's one that's dear to his heart. That's We're hoping to do more of this work in the future.
Yeah, so this is a project we did with Saft. Saft is a battery company, a battery manufacturer, international. But they have that typical corporate, facade, that corporate footprint where there's just very large buildings, a lot of impervious surfaces, and they have a lot of employees, and they were looking for a way to partner with Gunpowder Valley Conservancy to soften, their facade. They had a lot of non-natives. They had primarily exclusively non-natives. Um, but to bring in native plant material, increase biodiversity, treat some of the water, and also create some placemaking, create a place where their employees are reporting all the time, but wanting to beautify it. So we work with them and also the parking lot was quite hot because it's pretty much exclusively pavement. Um, so we came in and took stock of some of the considerations that they were looking for. There are many constraints on this property. We couldn't do our traditional, open space, green space transformation, but you do what you can with what you have. And that's something that I think we're learning is how do we adapt some of our landscape practices to these hardened sites that are primarily impervious. And I think this ultimately it was successful. Amy and I were able to do a presentation for their staff to try and not necessarily, well, do some of the transformation at their property, but really educate and inspire their staff to do this work at home. So it was kind of like an entry level of how to, demonstrate that it can be done, demonstrate that natives are beautiful, but then also kind of spread that back into the community. And maintenance, another dear part. So I know people, different folks have different opinions on maintenance, but I see maintenance as an opportunity to build a relationship with your garden. Oftentimes we create these gardens because we have this innate gravitation to plants and the beauty, and there's so many memories that are linked into our grandma's gardens, and the memories over the years of what gardens represent. So we want one on our property. um, but we've grown, our society is so busy that we see maintenance as a chore that we want to avoid, when it's really an opportunity to get to know your garden. Like we said, they're living ecosystems. They're supposed to be changing. We can anticipate that change. Um, but just like regular relationships with people and our friends and family, they require regular attention and care, right? It's that closeness, it's that contact that allows us to really understand what they're about, what do they like, what insects are there, why is this not growing this way, or what happened to that plant that all of these things. When you have that regular routine kind of contact, you can start to learn quite a bit about your garden and kind of anticipate these things over the years. So I encourage everyone to check in with your garden, just like you would a friend. This is throughout the year. There's always a good time, but especially during those times of stress, meaning, right around now where it's starting to get cold. Maybe your garden needs to be put to bed, some extra mulch put on it so that things don't freeze. So that extra bedding of mulch will help keep it warm. In the summers or in the spring, it may need to be split or divided. Maybe it's too cramped. In the summer, obviously, with water, if there's a drought or it's extra hot, those are good times to check on your garden and keep them optimal. Maintenance is not about it's gotten out of control. That's called an overhaul. Maintaining is that you are, keeping it where you want it. So you're trying to prevent having to do too much work and a little here and there. You see a weed in month one, you pluck it, you pull it. You know, if you don't, it becomes three. If you don't another month, it becomes 10. So it's that routine relationship that is best practices.
Great. Thank you, Ibram, for giving that overview to conservation gardens and making maintenance sound like a fun thing to do, which it really is. I mean, that's really, I love the fall, but I really love spring. I love when all my plants wake up again and it's like seeing old friends. I'm like, oh, you're here. So, um, but if you're not out there looking in your garden, you might miss some of that joy. And so hopefully, as we get to the end of our talk, you might already have a garden, or maybe you're thinking about starting one. Um, we have a little bit of just several little resources that you can use to take action at home to promote clean water. Um, you probably are aware of this, but our host, Hartford Land Trust, their Grow Wild Hartford program, they have a pollinator garden trail. So you don't have to go far for inspiration. There's already places where come next spring or summer you can go and see like what these different gardens look like. So um, little mini road trip in your future. Um, it's the same with, you can challenge yourself to visit a native plant nursery. There's increasingly more and more specialized nurseries. And, granted, some of them are just wholesale. There are some that are wholesale, so they don't sell to the public. But every once in a while, they might have a special day where you can go and purchase plants. The Maryland Native Plant Society has an online directory of these native plant sales and vendors. Um, I would also say it's just as important to go to your traditional big box stores and ask for native plants. As we show that there's an increased demand for native plants, people will listen to what the customer wants, and I think more and more people are asking for these native plants that are beautiful and functional and provide so many important services um, to us. If you like learning more about things, if you're kind of a do-it-yourself gardener, the Alliance for the Chesapeake Bay has their Native Plant Center, which allows you to search, you can look up all the different plants and their Latin name, their common name, but you can also search by, I have this situation in my yard. I have, you know, it's part sun or it's really wet or really dry. Plants that tend to grow in clay soils. You can look at all the different things and find, get some ideas before you go shopping at the native plant nursery. And finally, if you are lucky, I know it's hard to see the contrast on this map, but if you're in that sliver of Hartford County, that's part of the Gunpowder, which is really like west of Jarrettsville, part of Falston, Kingsville, Joppatown, Mariner Point Park. Um, if you are in the Gunpowder watershed, you might be eligible to have a rain garden installed at your house. If you fill out with the QR code or the URL, you can get on our wait list for a free yard assessment. We have been really, as we've had some turnover in staff and just trying to like streamline our process. We're getting better. We're getting more efficient. We're not, keep in mind we're a nonprofit. We have a certain amount of grant funding that we have to prioritize to create these gardens. So we're not your typical landscaping company that just is, going to put in these gardens. But I think it's very much worth the wait because you get, Ibram and our other staff's expertise in how to make a garden that, fits in your yard and is also functional as far as like dealing with stormwater runoff. And we have discounts on installing rain gardens. And so all that to say, we would hope, very much that you can stay in touch. We have slightly different emails. Our typical email is, first initial, last name. The interwebs didn't like Ibram's original email, so his is special. It's just his first name, at gunpowdervc.org. We welcome you, even if you're not part of the Gunpowder watershed. We have free workshops, and certainly what we're talking about applies to other parts of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. And yeah, we've thrown a lot of information at you, and we're happy to answer questions if we can.
Yeah,
I will
thanks,
stop
Amy and Ibram.
sharing.
I did put links to all of our organizational websites that we kind of threw at you. Amy did such a great job of highlighting Grow Wild and Hartford Land Trust. So all of that is now in the chat, if you wanted to bookmark it real quick. But yes, anytime that, or now is a good time to ask questions. I can answer some, but I'm mostly going to hand it off to Amy and Ibram because they are the experts here tonight. So, yes, if you are in an area that experiences a lot of stormwater flooding, if you work in an area that maybe could benefit from some of these gardens, like Ibram was showing us, now would be the time to see if you can get more information.
Hey guys.
Hey, Ron.
Hey, thank you. Hey, so this was a great presentation. I just found out about it today, and thank you for sending the link. One of the things I will say is my wife and I, we made it a point probably about 2 years ago. We went to the Bel Air Armory, and I think Grow Wild was there for a native plant sale. And we talked to some people, and we used to be big box store people, so we just go grab something, throw it in the yard. And I will say, we've gone away from that totally. So this was our first year. We took part of the yard, did a full pollinator garden, the different types of milkweed, ones for the wet areas, and then the ones that also do really good in the dry areas. And we really saw the results. I mean, so now my wife's talking about taking another part of the yard and doing it, which I don't want to lose that green space. But what I'm trying to say is we've seen the benefit, and it's one of those things that once you get started, like you don't want to stop. It's like we saw the monarchs when they came in. Well, we had of course the caterpillars. They were all over the place. They were all over the milkweed. We were watching it. Even we had the aphids come in there, but the caterpillars are actually eating the aphids, so that was a good thing. But then we started seeing the green sacks throughout the different parts of the yard, even in our neighbor's yard. Our neighbor came over the fence and was like, "Hey, we see these green sacks hanging from some of our plants that we've got." And I said, "Leave them," right? And so they were actually able to watch those things turn from green to black, and then next thing you know, we're sending videos to each other as we're seeing the monarchs come out. So it's really exciting. And I will have to say it's starting to spread. So, my neighbors getting excited. They're planting it, in their garden that they've got next year. The rain barrel was also huge. And, this was another thing. So 2 years ago, we got rain barrel. We got our first one. There's a guy named Jim Pritchard here in Falston. He makes some nice rain barrels. So we picked one up from him 2 years ago. And this year we got our second rain barrel. And the one thing that I'll say is for our house plants that we have here in the house, if you're growing house plants, the water from the rain barrel versus the water that you get out of the sink, your plants react night and day, right? So it's amazing. But yeah, we're huge fans. I talk to people about it all the time, and right now I'm trying to control how much. I mean, I get it, but I still like to have a yard for people to play, badminton or whatever. But anyway, so yeah, thank you guys for this. The big part that I took away from this is we have a spot in our yard just naturally. We're on a corner lot where the water all runs down to the corner and pools up, and all the houses. So my neighbor that's across from me, his house slopes down, and it's a natural just drainage line that goes across probably 6 houses down the street. And so what I would like to do is work on a rain garden for my area, of that yard, because where I'm at, it really is a larger bowl, and it's not too big. It's probably about a 6 foot by 6 foot, but you could see when it rains and it comes down, it's the first place to pool up, and it just goes all the way across down the houses. So That's my goal. I'm going to definitely visit your guys' site to see what ideas I can get. But, we walk past the Abingdon Library, and there's a nice rain garden there. So
Yep.
if we can get a little piece of that in our backyard, that'd be great. But that's it. I didn't mean to talk your ears off.
Keep
No, that was
talking,
great.
Ron. Yeah.
Yeah, doing our work for us. I will put in a plug to maybe be an enabler and say that the last 2 springs, the first Saturday in May, we have had our spring fling event here in Bel Air, where we have plant vendors. GVC was there as well, and it's a place where you can buy plants, you can meet I would say like lawn care service folks. So people like Ibram who can help you design something, or someone who does a more like the mill who maybe has a bit more of a business surrounding it. And we get a lot of folks able to maybe answer some of those questions that you have, if GVC, you happen to be outside their service area or something. But so that's a plug for everybody. Come this May, the first Saturday will be our third annual spring fling event. And I think each year we have about 15 or so vendors ranging from all sorts of things. But the main theme is that it's native plants or natural kind of accessories to help you with that as well. So. All right, thank you. And then we have a question in the chat from Catherine. She says, what recommendations might you change if you're already on wetlands or really wet lands? So I'm going to hand that off to Amy and Ibram.
What recommendations to enhance the wetland or to mitigate the wetland? I would say
No,
keep the wetland.
it's actual wetlands, not just land that's wet.
Oh,
So
sorry,
are there any
Catherine.
things that you would do different if you had like a rain garden that you were going to put in, but you already had wetlands on your property?
Yeah, I mean, they complement each other. So a rain garden wouldn't necessarily fit. It's not the appropriate choice for a wetland, but there are submerged gravel wetlands if you're trying to grow specific plants in them or get a little bit more storage. You can also do basecaping on the perimeter of your wetland. So anywhere as it starts that ecotone where it starts to transition back and move away from being a wetland, you can create a buffer with basecapes, trees along that buffer. Basically, it's about trying to create some pre-treatment before it actually gets to the wetland, because the wetland actually takes up a lot of nutrients and does a lot of pollution reduction, but any that you can create on the way to the wetland would be a benefit to the wetland.
Thank you.
All right. I don't see any other questions right now. Before we sign off,
Deborah
go ahead.
looks. Yeah.
Oh, yes, Deborah, go ahead.
So I'm not in the Gunpowder Conservancy area, which I am so impressed with you guys. You blow me away. And Ron made me smile the whole time he was talking, because I got the yard that's changed my life too, or my perspective. So I have a friend, and she has runoff from the building that she lives in and the home right next door at the end of a downhill cul-de-sac. And she said, what can I do? And I looked, and it's all going downhill between the houses to a stream bed. So I'm listening to Ibram's talk about what do you do before you get to that water. She can't put a rain garden in because I think it's too steep. Conservation. And who does she go to? More than what does she do? Who can help her with that? Does she have to go to a landscaper? Does she go to the county? This is Harford.
This is Harford County.
Yeah, it's not in your area.
I can
Right
give
outside
you
of yours.
the Harford Soil Conservation District is a quasi-governmental agency. It is meant to serve the citizens of Harford County. Now, while they typically focus on, I'll say, agricultural or larger properties, they do have an entire sediment and erosion control division where it is their purview to not only approve plans to make sure that we're not shipping truckloads of dirt into the bay, but also to help I will say smaller landowners or the suburban urban kind of areas where you have these closer home communities to help with suggestions just like this and what conservation best management practices would be most appropriate for your area.
Okay. It's Hartford Soil Conservancy?
Soil Conservation District. They're in
Okay.
the Ag Center up in the Darlington
Oh,
Street
sure.
bubble.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay, that's good. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Yeah,
Great
and it's
presentation.
trees and swells.
That's
So
why I mentioned
trees,
trees to her.
yeah, trees, and I'm not sure who does the trees in Hartford County, but
We got
um,
somebody.
yeah, trees and those swells that I was showing you along a slope to try and tier
Yeah, which I
the
had not
water.
seen before.
Yep.
Thank you.
hmm
Yeah. Okay, we have another question in the chat from Sarah. Are there publicly available maps to look at drainage areas that would go beyond your own yards? Parentheses, like you showed in the previous slides. Maybe Amy or Ibram has an answer. I also have a suggestion, but I'll let you guys go first.
I think, well, I know Jackie and I were at an event earlier with the Maryland Environmental Trust, which is bringing land trusts together. They were sharing several different, so you don't, certainly, there's, GIS tools where, more, fancier, map skills, but there are web-based, conservation planning where you might, and I could certainly look to see if it would address drainage area. There might be, once you have a map, you're familiar with, like, Google Maps that has the different base layers. You can look and find your property and zoom in, and there might be a layer that kind of shows you drainage area. And certainly Ibram has more experience doing this, so there might be just an easy answer. But yeah, no, I think I mean, I really like the comment, the yard that changed my life, like in a positive way. Like, who thought that we would be so, like, learning all these, like, the intricacies of our property? But it's really, it's really inspirational.
Yeah,
Kristen, did
go
you?
ahead, Ibram.
Okay.
So there was a comment earlier in the chat. Maybe it was an A name. My memory's awful. But I responded by saying that there was a website that you could get stream use designations. That is a nice website. That's an interactive map through Maryland Department of the Environment, where you can see all the streams in Maryland mapped out, different use classifications, and you can kind of see where like the different fingers that kind of connect to the bigger river system that then connect to the bigger river system. You can get a good overview of that. And then I just put another link in the chat. This is called Stream Stats, and similarly to what Amy was just describing, this is there's a website. It's run by the federal government, so unfortunately right now it does not work that well. Hopefully once that all clears up, this website will be active again. But what you can do is you can type your address in, it'll take you to it, and you just kind of put in a few parameters, like click where you're starting from, and it'll do the drainage area from above that point. So you can kind of see how everything flows to you at that point on the map that you've indicated. Virginia also has included the Merlin webpage, which is another one that Amy and I talked about today. Merlin is an acronym. I think it's the Maryland Environmental Restoration Land, something or other. But that is like, I don't want to speak for Amy and Ibram, but I go to this website at least 5 times a day to do all of the various land trust conservation minded things. So if you want to feel like a professional, definitely use that website because we use it all the time.
I was just going to add, I don't know if you're familiar with Google Earth, but they have a nice kind of like entry level way of kind of seeing big picture without getting too bogged down in some complicated maps, though they are very fun to explore. But with Google Earth, they allow you to see a profile. So it doesn't speak to you in contour lines and, like, the grade changes like that, but it actually kind of shows you, like, imagine taking a cut. So you would draw a line from where you're interested in understanding the profile, and it would show you that section and show you it's going down, it comes up, it's going down, it comes up, so you can see kind of an easier way to interpret the contours.
All right. I think that's all the questions we have. If you find yourself eating dinner tonight and just ruminating on how awesome this presentation was, and you have all these questions that just didn't come to you in the moment, feel free to reach out to me, Amy, or Ibram. We communicate quite often, so I can easily pass you on to them, and vice versa. But I just want to again thank our partners at Gunpowder Valley Conservancy. As always, they do a fantastic job at presenting this information to the folks that are interested and need it. And if you have any interest in either of our organizations, the links are in the chat. Otherwise, we hope to see you guys soon. Next big event that I know that all three of us will be at will probably be the Spring Fling in May, but we hope to see you well before then. All right, guys. Have a good rest of your evening. I'm going to end the recording.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
night.